Hello everyone, welcome to episode 17 of Conversing on Africa's Peace, a podcast focused on African Union's Peace and Security Council and key related issues, produced as a collaboration between the Australian Embassy in Addis Ababa and Amani Africa Media and Research Services. This is Sion from Amani Africa once again. Today it's going to be me and my colleague Hani. Hani, welcome to this new episode.
Thank you, Sion.
So, as we all may have noticed already, Namibia has taken over the role of chairing the PSC for the month of March. The program of work adopted for the month envisages 6 substantive agenda items and also an informal consultation of the PSC with its counterpart, the EU PSC. This is actually taking place today, already in progress. So, as always, before we delve into the details of March's program, why don't we, as always, go back and reflect on the Council's engagement during the previous month of February. Hani, I'll hand over to you to shed some light on that.
Yeah, thank you, Sion. I think we've already covered this in our previous episode, but Morocco was chair of the PSC in February 2024. And the initial program of work was really full with 12 substantive sessions. However, given that there was the summit and activities around the summit, the program of work was revised to only have 6 sessions. And even then, with those 6 sessions, there were 2 that were postponed.
Yeah.
The session on connectivity, the
ministerial one.
Yeah. And fighting against terrorism as well was postponed.
Yeah.
But just generally looking back, I think the 2 sessions that received much attention was the situation in South Sudan, and then also looking at the nexus between peace, security, and development via the Tangier's conference. So I can just touch a little bit about that in this episode. I think, as we've mentioned before, Morocco's chairship crafted a program of work that looks at a holistic outlook into peace and security, and as such they spearheaded the Tangier's process where the conference was focusing on the nexus between peace, security, and development. And of course this was in collaboration with key development partners, the Africa World Development Bank, UNECA, and UNDP as well. And it focused on the commitments from member states to revitalize Aspiration 7 and Sustainable Development Goals within the framework of the Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 of the UN. That's kind of an overview of the session on Tangier's conference. I can go into a little bit about the session on South Sudan. As you know, we are heading to elections in South Sudan in December, and so this was the session is expected to address or pave the pathway towards ending the transition period if these elections are held and they are...
What preparations are underway.
Credible, and it will end the transitional period. But some of the preparations ahead of the elections that the South Sudanese government has in place is the appointment of leadership for the National Elections Commission and the National Constitutional Review Commission and Political Parties Council as well. So they have been appointed, and they've also established a joint task force to coordinate the efforts around constitutional making and electoral processes. Some of the concerns that might have been highlighted during the session ahead of the elections is the type of elections to be held, to agree on a realistic electoral calendar, logistics, legal and security issues, and making sure that you fast track the implementation of the transitional security agreements, and looking at electoral security plans and the deployment of necessary united forces to provide security for the elections. And other things that may have been also discussed is the increasing instability and insecurity in the country. As you know, there's been internal communal violence in various parts of the country. Cross-border clashes over territorial disputes, and especially in the Abyei region. So essentially, in addition to it covering the concerns ahead of the election, some of the other issues that may be covered in the session, we don't have the outcome documents yet.
Outcome documents.
That's released, So other things that might be covered in the session is the trilateral mechanisms and the report to the PSC on the state of constitutional making and electoral processes. And then the commissioner of PAPS also was expected to brief the council on his recent visit to South Sudan, so that might be also addressed. The Rome process has been handed over to Kenya in December 2023, end of last year. So there was recent developments that Kenya had reached out to the opposition parties, the Sudanese opposition movement, and so that might be a point of
that might be captured.
Exactly, yeah. And as you all know, there's big IDP crisis in both Sudan and South Sudan, and the influx of Sudanese into Sudan as a result of the war has increased the number of IDPs to 3 million. There's already 2.2 million IDPs in South Sudan prior to the outbreak in Sudan. So if you add another million,
the war in Sudan is really sort of fueling up the IDP crisis.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
So I think those are the things that might be addressed in the session.
That's actually quite, I mean, Sudan's elections, I think we all have our eyes on that. Hopefully the government and also political parties as well as other stakeholders will be able to pull around, finalizing especially the pending activities of the revitalized agreements. Yeah. Hopefully we will see the elections taking place by December this year as planned. So thanks Hani for that look back. Looking ahead, we, as I mentioned, have 6 substantive agenda items which are planned to be considered by the Council during this month. The exchange, or rather the informal consultation with the EU PSC is something that was initiated, in the context of the visit of members of the EU PSC. And, it's sort of expected to serve as a platform for the two to exchange on issues which are related to working methods. So it will be interesting to hear what the outcome of that would be. Although this is not, of course, a substantive sort of or a formal sort of session.
Okay.
So the program of work under Namibia's chairship, the 4 of the sessions will be focusing on country and region-specific situations. And then we'll have 2 thematic sessions, So, Hani, maybe you could walk us through the first session that will be taking place during the month.
Yeah, as you've mentioned, there's a lot of country-specific sessions
interestingly,
for this month. Yeah, and looking ahead, I think the first session that will come up next on Monday is SAMIM, the Southern African Development Community Mission in Mozambique. Considering that the AU PSC did not have any convenings on SAMIM, the peace force, in 2023, this will be a first time for them to re-engage since 2022. Yep. So even though they didn't engage, they did have the PAPS Commissioner, Directorate of Conflict Management, Sajoba, follow through on their request from 2022. In 2022, they had requested to the Commission to undertake a mission to Mozambique and to hand over donated military equipment from China. In this regard, the Commission had followed through, and at the end of 2023, there was a delegation that went to Pemba and delivered the donated equipments. Other key developments that might be addressed is the recent decision by the SADC Economic Community to extend the mandate of SAMIM to ending in July 2024. So I think moving forward, that might be the point of concerns for the PSC, and what does SAMIM look like in the next few months before the end of its mandate.
Interesting. So I suppose one of the outcomes we might expect from this session would be perhaps the endorsement of this decision to extend SAMIM's mandate. So on the same day, Hani, we will also have another agenda item, which is also going to be focused on a country-specific situation and also similarly a deployment of force. That would be the situation in Eastern DRC and the very recent deployment of the SADC mission in DRC, which is now, I believe, referred to as SAMIDRC. So with respect, to the situation in Eastern DRC itself, the focus of the session will most likely be on, this continued fighting in the region, also the gross human rights violations, which continue to allegedly be committed by M23 and also other armed groups, including the ADF, which is designated as a terrorist group. In connection to that, the worsening humanitarian situation in DRC and also the wider region may also be of central focus. particularly, given the increasing displacement crisis that is fueled by, again, insecurity in Eastern DRC.
Yeah.
Another important aspect connected to the situation in Eastern DRC is, of course, the continuing degradation of bilateral relationship between DRC and Rwanda, something we've all been, again, keeping an eye on, especially the events we saw at the summit. Very interesting and unfortunate, of course, because it would have been really good to see some sort of improvement to the kind of relationship we've been witnessing over the past couple of years. But when we come to the actual deployment of the SADC mission in DRC, I believe, one of the key issues which would really warrant this in-depth discussion and reflection by the PSC is the need to ensure coordination of this mission with existing political and peace processes that are already in place. So this refers to, of course, the PSCF, the Peace, Security and Cooperation Framework for the DRC and the region. Also the Nairobi and Luanda processes that were more recently launched. And we say this particularly given the fact that this new mission actually doesn't have any political track, so to say. So having regard to the context, having regard to what's happening in DRC, and specifically in this eastern region, ensuring such kind of coordination and cooperation with such political and peace-focused initiatives is essential, if the crisis is to be resolved in a sustainable manner. So we hope to see this as one focus of PAC session. But let me hand over to you, Hani, to look into another
It's very
session.
interesting. I think it should be an alignment with the Luanda political processes as well.
Yeah.
In the DRC. Anyway,
Yes.
I think the next country session that the PSC will be convening is on ATMIS. As we've seen recently, there was preparations for the third phase of drawdown, where the AU Commission held a meeting with ATMIS, a consultative session with the Chief of Defense on the 13th of February to discuss the challenges that were encountered during Phase 2 drawdown, including technical pauses that was requested by the government of Somalia in September. So this is most likely going to dictate the conversation with the PSC in this coming month.
Okay.
And in terms of what will be the next phase of the drawdown and how that will look like will be the center focus of their convening. And then other issues that might be touched upon is how the Ethiopia-Somaliland MOU can impact the drawdown of ATMIS. As we've seen, there's been coverages of Al-Shabaab mobilizing and recruiting more forces using the MOU as a leverage. So that's something that is very contentious and nuanced that the PSC really needs to look at, and how that will impact ATMIS drawdown. Yeah.
I don't know if we would see any specific reference to that in the outcome document, but definitely it's a development worth reflecting on, Annie, as you have mentioned. And of course, ATMIS drawdown again, whether Somali government is actually really ready to take over responsibility for security would be definitely the focus of
and
this
increasing
session.
their capacity as a state to
exactly
to manage.
replace but over to you again.
And again, there is another session on regional specific. So the PSC will have a convening on Abyei region. As mentioned in our annual review, there was not a session in 2023 on Abyei. So this provides an opportunity for the PSC to refocus and re-engage the region, given the consequences of the Sudan war has had on Abyei especially. So this would look at maybe the update on the implementation of the agreement on temporary securities and administrative arrangements for the Abyei administration, and all the agreements contained in the cooperation agreement between the two nations of Sudan and South Sudan. Prior to actually the briefing on Abyei, there will be an informal consultation on Abyei region. This will allow for Sudan to be a part of the process since they are suspended from the activities of the AU. In addition to that, there were, in the previous session the PSC held, they had agreed to have a biannual briefing to the Council on the following matters, which looks at the nomination of a facilitator for the Abyei Joint Oversight Committee. So that might be a point of that will be addressed. This looks at the responsible person for the implementation of the agreement on the temporary arrangements on security and administration. And then there was also a request to conduct a study on the root causes of instability in the region, alongside a matrix of implementation of the PSC's decision on Abyei. So that might be something to follow up on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in addition to that, they had requested the Commission, in collaboration with existing regional international development institutions, to look at the socioeconomic and humanitarian arrangements in the region as well. So that might be another point of focus for the PSC. As I've mentioned earlier on, humanitarian concerns are also going to be addressed, most probably going to be addressed, seeing that there's been an increase in IDPs in that region as well, given the conflict in Sudan.
I
think that's pretty much it for the country.
But of course, there's also a footnote in the provisional program of work adopted for the months that there might be a session on Sudan. But yeah, it's interesting that the chairship has focused on this very grave situation in this region, in the Horn region. So coming into the thematic sessions for the month, the first one of these will be a briefing of the AU panel of the WISE, and also its subsidiary bodies, interestingly, for the first time will be briefing the PSC. So as we all know, Hani, there's been this interruption of engagement between the AUPSC and the panel of the WISE for quite a while, since 2017. And this was only revived in 2023 last year. So it's quite interesting to see that there is now this effort to sustain the engagement back again, as we're seeing a follow-up since last year and another session being convened this year. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this session is unique in that the briefing is not going to be just by the panel of the WISE, but also a subsidiary bodies, the FAME-WISE and the recently established WISE-Youth. So, although FAME-WISE was established in 2017 and it has also been considered or engaged by the PSC within the framework of the Council's agenda item on women, peace and security, it would be the first time for it to actually be briefed by FAME-WISE within the framework of its engagement with the panel of the WISE. Again, similarly, of course, it will be the first instance for WISE-Youth to be briefing the Council, also given, the fact that it was very recently established and endorsed only at the Certified Assembly of Heads of State Summits in 2022. So just one more thing is that, it's been really encouraging to see not only the revival of engagement between the panel of the WISE and the PSC, but also the fact that the panel of the WISE has now sort of solidified and engaged with specific member states. An example of this had been its mission to Chad. So it's good to see it's taking on its preventive role. And
mediation role as well.
Exactly, and contributing to the efforts of the PSC. So Hani, maybe walk us through the other thematic session.
Thanks, Leon. The last thematical session and the last session of the month will be on women, peace and security.
Okay.
In the initial program of work, this was actually supposed to be in the beginning of the month, right before International Women's Day on March 8th. Usually the PSC has this convening every year annually around International Women's Day, but this time they've decided to push it back to the end of the month, I think, to make sure that it's also along the lines of the induction of the incoming PSC members. They're having their inductions at the end of this month.
I believe taking place in Namibia, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And over the years, this session, the Women, Peace and Security session, has usually went along with the theme of the year. Last year was on AFCFTA, and most likely this year it will be around the theme of the year, education, and ensuring access to education for women and girls across the continent. So I think most likely that will be the center of their conversation. Other items that the PSC will address is the request for the EU Commission and the Special Envoy of Women, Peace and Security to undertake a comprehensive review of the involvement of women in peace processes. That was their last session. And that was a request from their last session. So I think they'll pick it back up and say, where is the process at? Have they undergone the study in terms of including women in peace processes? So So I think those are the two main agenda
areas.
items, for the women, peace and security. It might change, but as of now, that's what we have,
Yeah, no, yeah, that's interesting. It would actually be interesting to see a follow-up to the request from the previous session on engaging women in peace processes.
Yeah.
It was particularly interesting to see that women actually came and briefed the PSC, women from conflict-affected member states in the continent. And I think that's something the PSC might want to keep on replicating in coming sessions, hopefully in this one as well. But yeah. So thank you so much, Hani. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me
on this episode. So I guess that brings us to the end of another episode. We do wish Namibia a very fruitful month as it takes the chairship for March, and we wish everyone taking part in the work of the PSC productive discussions on the important topics outlined briefly here today. We are happy to encourage our listeners to dig deeper into PAC's agenda as well as the analytical work that we produce. Amani Africa is also very appreciative of the partnership and support of the Australian Embassy in the production of our insights on the provisional program of work of the PSC each month, and we believe that this podcast is also a very useful accompaniment to our work. So before we go, as we always do, we'd like to wish the following African states happy National Days of celebration in March. So these are the Kingdom of Morocco, who will be celebrating tomorrow, actually, on the 2nd of March. The Republic of Ghana will be celebrating on the 6th of March. The State of Mauritius on the 12th of March. Republic of Tunisia on 20th of March. And finally, the Republic of Namibia, chair of the PSC for this month, on the 21st of March. Let me also thank our listeners for joining us for this month's edition of Conversing on Africa's Peace podcast, a collaboration between Amani Africa and the Australian Embassy in Addis Ababa. We hope you have a very great month. We'll be back next month to consider the PSC's agenda for April 2024. Until then, goodbye. We wish you all peace and prosperity.